Ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention for a moment? If you are a returned Peace Corps volunteer who is a student at American University or a Peace Corps fellow when the event is over, if you don't mind just hanging out by the end, we're going to try to get a photo before we leave with the director. Thank you so much for coming.
Okay, and they're on. Yeah, and they're on right now. I just need to. So
I'll go ahead and do that. Well, welcome everyone. Delighted that you're all here this afternoon for our first Dean's discussion of the spring semester. It doesn't feel like spring yet, but we're getting there. And just delighted to welcome Carrie Hessler-Radelet, the director of the Peace Corps. I was just saying we met about a year ago during the Martin Luther King Day of Service. We were across town, and she at that time was acting director and was going to be confirmed any day after that. And as you know, the process of confirmation in this country is not an easy one, so I admire her for her persistence and delighted that she was confirmed and sworn into office as the 19th director of the Peace Corps last June, and so having served previously as acting director and deputy director. She began her career in international development as a Peace Corps volunteer in Western Samoa, teaching secondary school English, and then went on to spend over 2 decades working in public health, focusing on HIV/AIDS and maternal and child health before returning to the Peace Corps. Many of you have seen that she has been very busy since becoming director of the Peace Corps and leading a number of efforts to change the process, which we'll discuss, and very exciting efforts to modernize and strengthen the Peace Corps, revamping the whole application process and changing the way in which people join and then go off to their service opportunity. And she's also done a lot to support the safety and health of volunteers in the field, which I also hope we'll get a chance to discuss. Before we start with the discussion, I do want to say a few words about several of the things we're very proud of here at SIS with our connection with the Peace Corps. In 2014, AU was ranked 10th in the Peace Corps' annual list of top Masters International programs. And SIS currently has 6 Masters International students, 10 of whom are currently serving in the Peace Corps and will return to SIS down the road. In 2014, we were ranked 9th in the Peace Corps annual list of top Coverdell Fellows programs. We currently have 31 Peace Corps Fellows serving their community, utilizing the skills they gained during their service and meeting the needs of the community, and furthering the third goal of the Peace Corps, bringing it home and inspiring the next generation of international service practitioners. And I just mentioned there's an annual meeting of the International Fair Schools Deans. We just held it Thursday and Friday, and Susan Rice was our keynote speaker and was talking about the need for the schools to get engaged in the middle schools and high schools, and so I mentioned the role that our fellows are playing in that. So I was glad to give a plug for the Peace Corps and our relationship to our National Security Advisor. We have tremendous other series of connections here between the school and the university and the Peace Corps. We now house the Peace Corps Archive, for which we held a great launch event with a number of former volunteers back, I don't know, it feels like it was almost 2 years ago. And then also want to thank Stephen Angelsmith here on the SIS staff for all he does with our connections to the Peace Corps, and Pat Wand, formerly with the library, and has also been an adjunct faculty member at SIS who's done so much to help our relationship with the Peace Corps and with this event in particular. So, welcome.
Thank you.
Great
One other
having you here.
statistic could I mention about
Please.
AU in general? Since 2009, AU has been on the top 5 of medium-sized universities, so that's quite an accomplishment.
For
And
producing Peace Corps
For producing
volunteers.
Peace Corps
Yes.
volunteers, and also it is one of our top producers in the Mid-Atlantic state, so we're very,
Good.
very pleased to be here.
Great. Well, it's great to have you. So, as I mentioned in the intro, we've been seeing all these reports about the streamlining of the application process, the efforts to modernize, the ability of people going into the Peace Corps to identify where they wish to go.
Exactly.
So can you talk a little bit more about that and what you've been trying to
Sure,
accomplish?
absolutely. We're very excited about the results of our changes to our application. In July, we launched our new application process. It has really 3 components. The first that you just mentioned is that you can choose the country and the program that you want to apply to. I should also mention that there is a box for you to say, I will serve wherever I am needed. And about half of our applicants actually have selected that option. But the point is they got to choose. And that has really dramatically, I think, increased the number of people who are interested in applying to the Peace Corps. The other is we dramatically shortened our application. It used to take 8 hours if you were to sit down and apply to the Peace Corps. I see people shaking their head. They remember that process. Now it takes you about 1 hour to apply to the Peace Corps. Now the reason we did this is because we did some research and we found that about only 25% of the people who began the Peace Corps application actually completed it, and now our completion rates are about 95%. And then the last part, which is similar to applying to university, is a apply by, know by, go by date. So you know now, if you are choosing to apply to China, let's say, to teach English in China, that if you apply by February 1st, you'll know by May 1st, and you'll be on a plane by July 1st. So it allows you to plan your life, basically. You have some transparency in the process, and it allows you to make choices about whether you want to do Peace Corps service relative to other possibilities for you. Now, our results have been pretty tremendous. We've had a 70% increase in the number of applications. We launched this new initiative in July, and we had the highest number of applications ever received in the past 22 years, and that was largely because of the last 3 months of the fiscal year. We're on a U.S. government fiscal year. This year, we're on track to have the highest number of applications in 35 years. So the net effect is that it's becoming much more competitive to be in the Peace Corps. We think that's a good thing, though, because we think that the Peace Corps should reflect the very best and brightest of the American people. We're also very interested in diversity, and we're actively reaching out to communities that have been underrepresented traditionally so that we can fully represent our country through service overseas. Can I just ask, you maybe did this before I came in, but how many of you are Peace Corps volunteers, returned Peace Corps volunteers?
Wow. Oh my
See,
goodness.
isn't that wonderful?
Wow.
Fantastic. So
And how many of you are currently students at SIS? Yeah,
Wow.
that's awesome.
And how many of you are fellows? Thank you so much for your service. This is tremendous. It's really great. And I see returned volunteers from every generation. I have a lot of friends out here in the audience, so it's wonderful to see you.
Can you describe a little bit, I mean, over the history of the Peace Corps, new countries have been brought into the program, and then also countries, there are countries that you then stop operating in.
Absolutely.
How does that process work for both new countries coming in and then completing work in countries, or I suppose in some cases being asked not to be present?
Right. That is one of the most important parts of our new reform effort, is the ability to strategically plan where we serve so we have greatest impact. Prior to that time, I'm pretty sure that the only time we left a country was when we either got a budget cut or if there was a coup or some other reason for Peace Corps being asked to leave. Now we have a very rigorous process. It's called the portfolio review process, which on an annual basis, we take a look at every single one of our countries. We have about 89 different indicators to help us to determine where we can be most effective. So these are things like need. And we use as many external, more objective resources as we possibly can. So need is determined by the Human Development Index, which is a UN indicator, which places countries in a list by quartiles. So we operate generally in quartiles 3 and 4, so the poorest countries in the world. Then we look at things like political stability. We look at crimes. We look at natural disasters. We look at the programmatic priorities of our country, the United States. So where are the places where there's alignment in terms of other U.S. government efforts where we could be partnering together. We look at the ease of doing business in that country and how much they want us there. So how hard is it? We have countries where it's tremendously difficult to get a visa. And then we get countries that welcome us with open arms and just want us to have as many volunteers as possible, Colombia being one of the countries that, of course, we have several members of Friends of Colombia. Colombia is a country that we just recently re-entered because it's safer now than it has been in the past. And it is welcoming us with open arms. And so that is important to us as well. We look at a lot of data related to medical care and safety and security because that is so important to us. Mm-hmm. And then we look at the all-volunteer survey. We survey our volunteers on an annual basis. We care deeply and we listen to them. We care deeply about how they feel and we listen to them. So they tell us whether or not they're satisfied with the program. They tell us whether they think the program should be discontinued, reduced, maintained as is, grow, or expanded significantly. And then we also survey our staff, and they give us their impressions as well. So all that together, it's a massive data set, but it helps us to be able to plan our footprint in a way that we think yields the greatest impact. Now, we don't just go up and down, obviously, on an annual basis, but we do identify. Actually, one of the most important uses for this is as a management tool. We can really target where we're having problems. And then we do close out. I mean, in the past 6 years that I've been with Peace Corps, we've left about 15 countries, and we'd entered about 10 more. Most recently, this past year, we just opened Myanmar. We're very excited about that. And Timor-Leste, which is a re-entry for us. We've expanded our footprint in a number of countries. Ethiopia, for example. We have diminished our presence in some other countries. El Salvador and Guatemala, for example, we noticed that there were very high crime rates against volunteers, and so we didn't leave those countries, but through really careful analysis, we identified the places where volunteers were being affected by crime, and then we were able to place volunteers in the lowest crime areas, and we also made a number of changes to transportation, which is where most of our volunteer crimes were taking place. So it enables us to really much more effectively target where we place volunteers so they can have greater impact and so that they're safer and healthier.
Great.
I might also add that USAID and the MCC have asked us to see our process, and we've gone over and give presentations to those two agencies, and now they are doing something quite similar.
Now, we asked how many people are return volunteers. How many people are thinking about applying to go into the Peace Corps?
Okay. Excellent.
All right.
So happy to have you here.
What's your advice here? What are you looking for? What kind of skills or what kinds of backgrounds are best suited for a successful application?
You know, I think the thing that's most important, frankly, is just having an open mind and a compassionate heart and a desire to learn from other people, an interest in learning another language, and some skills that you can transfer. Now, we have a really strong training program, and that's another part of the reforms that we have been implementing over the last couple of years, where we partner with other thought leaders and agencies that have a great deal of technical expertise to ensure that the technical training is such that we can prepare you to do a job that will make a difference in your community. We call this initiative Focus in, Train Up. Basically what we do is we ensure that the activities that you'll be doing as a volunteer are those that have proven through evidence to be most effective at achieving development results. And so we can turn an English major into a malaria specialist, for example. And if that's what you're interested in, you would have the chance to choose. But so the qualities that we're looking for are more personal qualities than necessarily a great deal of background in the subject matter that you will in fact be doing. That said, when we have folks with a public health background or environment or business or health or any of the teaching English or any kind of teaching, all of those give you a leg up, and we love the experience. And in fact, I would like to mention right here the Peace Corps Response Program, which is a shorter term program for higher skill individuals. You go for 3 months to 1 year, and it's the way that it is managed is more like a consulting agreement. You get a job and a sort of a scope of work for a particular job, and we're able to place you. So we have opportunities for people of all skill levels. Despite what I said about the 2-year volunteer, we have many, many PhDs. We have folks with masters. I mean, we have anyone from age 21 to our currently oldest volunteer is 80 years old. So, I mean, there's really a place for everyone, and what you really need is an open mind and a loving heart, frankly.
Can they put on the application that they came to this event?
Absolutely.
Is there a space in there? Okay, good.
Can I give an example of just how we can make a huge development impact in a community with someone who comes from a more or less generalist degree? And that is the story of 2 volunteers, Ann Lynn and Ian Hennessy. They are Peace Corps volunteers in Senegal, and they just recently completed their service. So this is a story from not too long ago. Ian had an undergraduate degree, I believe, in English, and Anne was, a sociology major, let's say. And they were sent to Senegal as health volunteers and placed in a rural community in Kédougou, it's called, southeastern Senegal, the highest malaria incidence rate in that country, very high. Every year many children died of malaria. They underwent some pretty good training in public health, and Ian, I'm going to speak first about Ian because Ian came first. So Ian was placed as a member of a community health team with another young man whose name was Sheikh. And Sheikh was his best friend and his closest colleague, and they lived next door to each other. And Sheikh had a 4-year-old niece whose name was Jenaba. And Jenaba is really the apple of Sheikh and Ian's eye. They used to play with her every day, and she just was a wonderful little girl. And they were doing all forms of sort of community health. And they had been part of a President's Malaria Initiative event where they had distributed bed nets to every single house in their community, and were feeling really good about it. And Jenaba slept under a bed net. Well, one day Jenaba came down with a fever, and 3 days later she died of cerebral malaria. And everyone was confused. How could this happen? She was sleeping under a bed net. But the problem with that one intervention is that although bed nets really do a great job of protecting you during the night, you're not always under your bed net. And Jenaba was up early in the morning, and she was bitten by a mosquito that had bitten someone else who was infected with malaria. Probably an adult who was asymptomatic, so they didn't even know that they had malaria. So Sheikh and Ian put their heads together, and they said, what can we do to stop what we call the latent reservoir of malaria that existed in that community? What can we do to stop malaria? We've got bed nets, that's great, but it's not enough. Because they were devastated by the loss of Jenaba. And what they determined that they wanted to do was go to every single household once a week, and using rapid diagnostic test kits, which they knew were available because Ian had them in his Peace Corps medical kit, test people who had symptoms of malaria, like a fever or headache or feeling nauseous. See if they had malaria, and if they had malaria, treat them on the spot. So this was just a concept that they had. So they first went to the Peace Corps country director, and he thought that sounded like a good idea. So with our connections to the President's Malaria Initiative and the National Malaria Control Program, we took the idea to them. And they said, wow, that's an interesting idea, pretty time intensive, but if you want to try it out, let's do it. So they agreed to support Ian and Shake and their little team of 500. It was a village of 500, and the Centers for Disease Control did a case control study. This village and another village that had the same bed net coverage rates and the same malaria incidence rates. And for one rainy season, 3 months, they went every single day, tested people who had the symptoms, treated them on the spot. After one rainy season, there was a 90% reduction in malaria incidence. What an amazing result. Never before had any intervention shown such promise. And so they went back to the National Malaria Control Program, CDC, verified their results. They decided to try it on a larger scale with the district, this time with several, like 15 villages, 15 intervention villages and 15 control villages. Same thing, Peace Corps volunteers, but mostly local community health workers mobilized by Peace Corps volunteers. Same result. Just last year, Anne Lynn, who is the second generation Peace Corps volunteer, 17 other Peace Corps volunteers, and thousands of community health workers just completed a malaria intervention, same concept, what we call now proactive case detection and treatment, in that whole state, 1.5 million people, 88% decrease in malaria incidence. It saved thousands and thousands of lives. And how did this happen? It's because of Peace Corps volunteer and a local community health worker who had their eyes on the ground and were creative and innovative, looking at what are the real problems in our community and what can we do to build capacity in our little village, identified an opportunity. What Peace Corps did, what Ian was able to do, and later Anne, was link them to resources that could help them take their vision, the community's vision, the community health team's vision, to reality. And now this is the policy, the community-based malaria prevention treatment policy of the government of Senegal. And just last week, Ian and Anne and a couple of other volunteers just presented it to the World Health Organization, and it's going to be piloted in a number of different countries in southern Africa, in malaria endemic countries in Africa. Peace Corps, for its part, has embarked on a massive program called Stomp Out Malaria. We now have 3,000 Peace Corps volunteers across the continent of Africa that are doing community-based case detection and treatment. And this was a volunteer, an English major and a sociology major. But the important part about this is that they were working with the community, identifying opportunities for development and barriers, and finding a way that made sense for that community. It's all the relationship. It's the relationships that volunteers develop with their community that makes them effective. So that's a pretty stunning example, but it is an example, and it's very recent.
Yeah, so it's a great example, and fits very well with the next question I had for you, which is, when the Peace Corps was first established, there weren't the full range of opportunities for people to go out and do work in less developed part of the world. Certainly not as many opportunities as there are today with so many different NGOs and other ways of getting involved in various parts of the world. So how do you think about the ways in which the Peace Corps remains a magnet for people compared to other kinds of opportunities that they might pursue, especially for our students thinking about should they do this or should they go work for some NGO or do something else? How do you frame the role of the Peace Corps?
Well, it's interesting because when Peace Corps started, there were really no other opportunities for Americans who wanted to do this kind of work apart from maybe missionary service. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was military service and there was missionary service and maybe research. But now there are literally thousands and thousands of different ways that you can get overseas for any length of time. And so I would say that reality was a real driver for our reform effort to try to make Peace Corps service effective, but also relevant. I believe, frankly, that Peace Corps is more relevant today than it's ever been. And I think that attracting volunteers or applicants to the Peace Corps, we need to be able to communicate our relevance. because people want to be part of something that's important. The kind of people who are attracted to Peace Corps are the same kind of people who applied, when I was a volunteer and when Dennis was a volunteer. Dennis was in our first class. So I think that people who are passionate, people who are driven, people who want to make a difference, want to be part of something that's relevant. And so that's really was the driver for our reform effort. Now, what is it about Peace Corps service that makes it relevant? And I would say, what I would like to do is answer that question really by talking about our 3 goals, because we have 3 goals, and those 3 goals have not changed throughout our history. So our first goal is a development goal. It is to help the people of our host communities build individual and institutional capacity so that they can meet their own development priorities. So I gave a good example of this just now with our malaria example, but what I think about Peace Corps is that we are at the last mile. We're in places where other development programs, even governments, can't reach easily, and where things often break down. And one of the things that I think is most important about the reforms that we've done lately is that we have worked very hard to get our other U.S. government agencies to see the value added of Peace Corps, to recognize that we are a valued and important part of a continuum of development assistance that our country offers. Because our volunteers, when working in partnership with others, can really identify what are the barriers to development, what are the opportunities, what are the challenges, and they can be incredible supporters of good development practice at the community level. And so we are working in partnership, just as I described with Ian. We're working with the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR, on our global HIV program, working with the Global Education Framework. We're working on Feed the Future, which is our global food security initiative. And people like that now. Today's generation of young people are really much more driven by desire to build professional skills than certainly in my generation. I had no clue what I wanted to do when I got older. But folks now, many of you here have career goals. You know exactly what you want to do. And Peace Corps service can help you get there by giving you really valuable skills and experience and language skills that will help you to be able to achieve those goals. So that's number 1, is the development goal and the opportunity it provides for young professionals to be able to get the skills and experience that you need to be able to get a career in that arena. Because now it is very hard to get a job in development unless you have experience. And you can't get experience unless you've got previous experience. So Peace Corps is really one of the best ways to get into the development business, if that's, or even I would say the diplomatic corps, if that's an interest of yours. Our second goal is to promote a better understanding of Americans on the part of people served. And I think this is really the heart of the Peace Corps experience. It's the very strong personal relationships that Peace Corps volunteers develop with their communities. And it is, when we all think back on our Peace Corps experience, it's those relationships that we remember the most. This is what we feel deeply, and it's what causes us to have lifelong relationships with our communities. And there are people in this room that have gone on after their Peace Corps experience to do phenomenal work in their countries of service that has been decades long. I think of Maureen Orth and her Marina Orth Foundation and the amazing work that she's done with young people and creating these incredible schools she's teaching 7-year-olds how to code. 7-year-old girls how to code. It's amazing what she's doing. But these relationships, and I would say in particular with young people, because 73% of our beneficiaries are under the age of 25. Young people who have given opportunity and a sense of hope and a future for themselves will go on to lead our world in a very positive way. And I think that we've seen, and you don't have to look very far, that people who don't have hope and a sense of the future are those that feel really disenfranchised and are perhaps more likely to use their potential for something other than good. We want to tap into young people and use all of their incredible energy and intellectual capital to do something positive in their communities. And that's what our Peace Corps volunteers do. They build hopes, they build dreams, they help people to realize their potential. And to that point, there are 12 presidents in the continent of Africa alone who attribute a Peace Corps volunteer to setting them on the path to the presidency. So that's the second goal. And then the third goal I've sort of already alluded to, and that's bringing the world back home. That's the return Peace Corps volunteers who are here in numbers, who bring their experience, their language skills, their cross-cultural expertise, and just their passion for other countries home with them. And the ripple effect of that experience lasts their whole lives. They are our current and future diplomats, development workers, CEOs, newscasters, business people, CEOs, pastors, and what they bring our country is incredibly rich. We have almost 250,000 returned Peace Corps volunteers, and I believe more than anything that this is the benefit of Peace Corps, because I firmly believe that the economic prosperity and the future, the security, the national security of our country is dependent on our country being able to develop a globally competent citizenry that is able to work effectively in an increasingly complex and diverse and interconnected world. The rest of the world is preparing for this kind of environment, and we need to be doing that as well. And I can't think of a better way than having a Peace Corps volunteer who lives and works in the community for 2 years and really understands the needs of another people and is able to build skills in managing intercultural teams, speaking another language, and understanding and appreciating other people's perspective. So that was a very long answer, but these are the reasons why I think Peace Corps is so relevant today and why I believe people should want to join.
So I'm going to turn it over to you guys in just a second. I did want to ask you one more question before I do, and that's an issue that has been a huge issue for universities in the press in recent months, and has been an issue for the Peace Corps as well. As you know, as we know from the media accounts, universities have just struggled with addressing the issue of sexual assault and have done a very poor job, as we've seen nationally, with continued incidents and a real difficulty in ensuring that our campuses are safe and that we're able to respond successfully to this issue. And the Peace Corps has also been in the press regarding this, and just wondering how you, as director, have sought to address this issue and where you see the prospects going forward. What things have you learned to date about the response that you've initiated, and where do you see the need to go forward?
I have to say that as a woman, as a returned Peace Corps volunteer, as a public health professional, and as a sexual assault survivor myself, I was sexually assaulted as a Peace Corps volunteer. There is nothing more important to me than this, than protecting our volunteers against sexual assault. Now, we know that sexual assault happens everywhere. It's part of the human condition. And in general, around the world, no one has done a very good job of addressing it effectively. I think our country is trying. And I think, and I know that we certainly, since literally I came on board here at Peace Corps in July of 2010. And almost immediately, really one of the first meetings I had was, first of all, with a group of young women who had been sexually assaulted and who had not received the kind of care and support that they needed from Peace Corps. And that experience really caused me to reflect back on my own experience, which frankly I had completely submerged. Because 30 years ago, when I was a volunteer, there was no program for sexual assault at all. It was just something that no one ever talked about, and there were no services. And frankly, things hadn't changed a lot in those 30 years. So we convened a group of experts. We have a Sexual Assault Advisory Council, which is comprised of 16 of our nation's leaders in this field. And we're fortunate because people care passionately about the Peace Corps and they want to help us be successful. So we have experts from the Department of Justice, from the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, which is our country's leading umbrella organization of rape crisis centers, from the FBI, from the White House, and especially from the Vice President's office, from the Department of Defense, and then a bunch of practitioners, including returned Peace Corps volunteers who are survivors. And this group has really helped us to figure out a plan going forward. And so now, 2 years later, we have created a very comprehensive sexual assault risk reduction and response program. I'll tell you a little bit about it. The first part of it is the risk reduction, which is the training that goes into helping our volunteers to be able to assess risk, identify situations that might be dangerous for them, give them the skills to be able to help each other, which is a big part of our program, and this is something that universities are employing now, bystander intervention. It's a very popular intervention. In fact, we learned it from the universities. But I would say that one of the most important tools that we have in our tool chest is just giving volunteers language capacity and cross-cultural skills so that they can assess a situation and understand the dangers. So there's a lot of training that goes into on sexual assault that goes into our pre-service training. Most of our volunteers think we're over the top in terms of this because we spend a lot of time talking about it, but it's really important, and so we feel quite good about our risk reduction program. And then the second part of it is the response, and that is training our staff, especially our first responders at the country level, our Peace Corps medical officers, our safety and security team, our other staff at post, to be able to respond effectively and respond compassionately. And we've had advanced training for our first responders, but we have also every single member of the Peace Corps staff, every single person, including the drivers, have had training in sexual assault response. And then the third part of it is really the policy environment, creating a policy environment that's effective to support a good program. So we have worked very hard in this, in creating this comprehensive program. I just met with our Sexual Assault Advisory Council a couple weeks ago. They analyze our program and send an annual report up to Congress, and they feel very good about the work that we're doing. It's never enough. It's never enough. We're going to continue to work hard on this issue, and we're working in close collaboration with the Department of Education. In fact, a number of university presidents have approached me, and I've talked to several of them to tell them about our program and suggest some resources that they could use to help improve their own program. It's a tough issue.
Well, it's great if we're all able to work together, because as you say, there's still so much to be done. So, so I applaud you for what you've been doing at the Peace Corps.
Yeah.
We have about 15 minutes, so I would ask you to, if you want to ask a question, identify yourself briefly and ask a brief question as well. So we will start up here, and then we have mics. Yeah.
Mike's coming.
So we'll start here, and then we'll go to you next. In fact, we'll take both questions. We'll group questions a couple at a time.
Thank you. I was a volunteer in Guinea, and I was actually fortunate enough to COS before it was evacuated, and I was also fortunate enough to take part in the sexual assault trainings when they were first implemented, and they couldn't have come at a better time because there were a couple individuals who had been assaulted. And I was also there during the government shutdown, and you mentioned briefly that you have been working to try to show that how important the Peace Corps is with other departments. And I assumed you meant, government departments. And then also, while we were there, it was kind of funny that the government is shutting down, and with Guinea in particular, it always seemed like there were a lot of budgetary concerns, not only for implementing these programs about sexual harassment, but also for trying to pursue programs like they did in Senegal, down in Kédougou, which was right across the border from me.
Oh.
So what efforts have you guys... Yeah. What efforts have you guys been doing to, fight for us in Congress to make sure that our budget doesn't shrink, especially in today's political climate?
All right, so fighting in Congress for the budget, and then we'll take another question right back here. Thank you.
Hi, Carrie. I want to thank you so much for speaking today. We actually met 2 years ago in Morocco when you came to visit several
so
volunteer
great to see you
sites.
again. Yes.
So Morocco, a lot of people know, has been a site with, or a country with high incidences of sexual assault and harassment.
Yeah.
Myself being a victim, a lot of other volunteers in our stage. And while we had done the trainings, and I'm really grateful for them, I think something that we found was lacking, at least on the ground, was monitoring and evaluating for PCMOs in country. So I wanted to see what kind of approaches or what plans Peace Corps Washington has to better monitor the type of medical care and attention that our Peace Corps volunteers receive on the ground.
Thank you. Do you want to just take those two questions first?
I think so, unless,
Okay,
if you want
that's
me...
fine. No,
Yeah,
let's
okay,
do that.
good, okay.
Our funding from Congress is very important, and I would also like to say that we have a goal of getting to 10,000 volunteers, which we haven't had since 1968. So we have that goal by 2018, and that means that we know exactly what we need every year in order to get to that goal. So we have been actively reaching out to Congress. I spent a lot of time up on the Hill. I also spent a lot of time at the White House because the president has to ask for the money before Congress is going to give it to us. We have established some very good relationships and I would say excellent support on the Hill. And we have been very clear with them what we need for next year, and I hope, fingers crossed, who knows actually with the new Congress, but I am optimistic about our being able to get what we need. In addition, I would say that we have been very successful in increasing the dollars to Peace Corps by partnering with other development partners. So, for example, Stomp Out Malaria, we did get resources from the President's Malaria Initiative. We get a lot of money from PEPFAR for our HIV/AIDS work. Feed the Future, our food security work, help support our agriculture and environment volunteers. All told, last year we added an additional $60 million out of a budget of $380. So a pretty substantial portion above and beyond our appropriated funds came because we were able to really demonstrate the value added of Peace Corps with our other development partners. So that has been a huge strategy because it's because of the money from other partners that we were able to really strengthen our technical training and program support. Now Guinea, as you know, we had to evacuate because of the Ebola epidemic. And Guinea has had a difficult history with coups and what have you, and we've been in and out of Guinea a number of times. And so it was actually less about the budget and more about the political situation, frankly, in Guinea. But I appreciated your question about Congress. The president of Guinea is an incredible supporter of Peace Corps and has one of the most poignant stories about the importance of Peace Corps that I have heard, and I've heard literally thousands of stories from leaders. So at the end, if I have an opportunity, I'll perhaps tell that story. I want to make sure I give people a chance to answer. So nice to see you again. And it is absolutely true. Morocco has probably, it has the global high in terms of especially sexual harassment. I don't know what it is about it, but it's something that's cultural. We just a couple weeks ago completed a complete assessment of our training around sexual assault and especially dealing with the issue of harassment, because our sexual assault training really dealt more with other forms of sexual assault. And so we've completely revised the training specifically for Morocco. And I should say that all of our programs are unique to the country, so they're tailored to the country context. But we've done a lot of work in Morocco over the last couple of months to improve the quality of the program there. In terms of the Peace Corps medical officers, we have done also, as part of our reform effort, quite a lot of work around improving the quality of our health service delivery to our volunteers, including the creation of a quality nurse hotline, which is someplace where any volunteer can call or email or what have you, reach out to if they had a complaint or a concern about their medical care, and then that's communicated directly to the Associate Director for Medical Services, and then it immediately launches an investigation into that particular incident. So that's sort of a customer service kind of mechanism. In addition, we have done a lot of work around strengthening the training of Peace Corps medical officers, especially around customer communication, customer service, having a patient-oriented approach. And we've done a lot around improving the support for people with persistent and chronic health issues post-service. We have a big problem with particularly dealing with long-term consequences of Peace Corps service and the mechanisms that the U.S. government has for dealing with people with those chronic conditions through FICA, basically, and it's not a perfect system. So we've done a lot of work with the Department of Labor about improving the post-service aspect of medical care. In addition, we've created a medevac support team, which is a whole program to better support medevacs when they're here. So we've taken a pretty thorough look at our Office of Medical Services. We have just this morning, 2 hours ago, I had a report from our Associate Director for the Office of Health Services, which is our umbrella organization, and he has just created a PCMO, Peace Corps Medical Officer Support Unit, that is really designed to dive deep into the skills and expertise and training that our PCMOs have. So I hope that all these measures will improve the quality of the support that volunteers receive, including training around sexual assault and harassment.
Yeah, we'll go here. Why don't we take these three? So you could start back. It's fine to either direction.
Thank you, Carrie, for coming out to visit with us. I'm Coleman McCarthy. I'm a journalist, and I teach here as an adjunct at SIS. And I've been wondering for many years, when I visit headquarters, the building is named after Senator Paul Coverdale, who was a fine man. But I was wondering, as someone who worked as Sergeant Shriver's speechwriter back in the Peace Corps days, and I've also had Mark Guerin, a former head of Peace Corps, as a student of mine at Georgetown Law School. My question is, why is the building not
The Sergeant Shriver building?
named after Sergeant Shriver? Senator Paul Coverdale was a fine man, but he's a good...
But you didn't work for him?
Could we change the name to Sergeant Shriver Building, is my question.
All right. Thank you, Coleman.
You know, I'd love to. The short answer is it would require an act of Congress. It was an act of Congress that created it. It was established through an act of Congress as a Paul Coverdale
Then you
Peace Corps
should focus
building.
on the budget.
Yeah, but that's an excellent question that we ask ourselves every time we walk in the door.
And then we'll go here in the green and then...
Hi, my name's Allison, and I was a volunteer in Tanzania, and I'm kind of wondering how the change on reactions to sexual assault might influence how other crimes against volunteers are treated, because I came back right when that was all going on, and people seemed to be really surprised that, you know, sexual assault victims would be treated this way, and I, as a returning volunteer, said, well, that's any time a crime happens to
Yeah,
a
that's
volunteer.
right.
You just get pickpocketed and you go to report it, and it's like, well, where were you? Were you out late? Were you alone? You know, the whole thing. So I feel like that kind of culture may be influencing. So how do you think that that's going to change how other crimes are dealt with?
I would say that it took, you want, okay, well, sorry, we'll take this other question, then we'll answer it together.
Not a problem. Hi, my name is Stephen Ellis. Thank you for being here today. I am actually an applicant. I've already put in my application, and thank you. I was not expecting that.
How long did it take you to fill out the application?
It took me an hour and a half. I was in Costa Rica when I was filling out the application.
Oh, you were in
so-
Costa Rica.
Yeah.
Some connection.
No, but it didn't take them 8 hours. That's
No, it
good.
didn't take 8
That's
hours.
great. All right.
So the no-buy date should be this week, so I'm keeping my
Oh,
fingers
really?
crossed.
Okay.
I just have a curiosity question that's always been on my head. Why 2 years? Why not more? Why not less? Why is the service always 2 years? So.
Great question. Okay, Allison? That's Allison's first. Crime against volunteers, absolutely, as part of our sexual assault risk reduction and response program, we took a hard look at all crimes against volunteers. And we created a new office, the Office of Victim Advocacy, which deals with anyone who's been a victim of crime. So we have 3 victim advocates, and whenever we get a report, and we get reports, everything that's reported to Peace Corps gets reported to the Office of Victim Advocacy, and they make a phone call to offer help and support. And also it is the crime, we keep very careful data, and that is what enables us to move volunteers that are in areas that seem to be high crime areas. So that's one thing. The second thing that you talked about is the culture, and I'm not exactly sure what you meant, but let me just say that the enactment of our program really did lead to a culture shift at Peace Corps. A culture that really placed volunteers firmly in the center of every single thing that we did. Now you might think, why wasn't it that way before? I mean, I think that always Peace Corps staff have been very supportive of Peace Corps volunteers. We're all there because we love our volunteers, we feel passionately about our mission. But what we found is that, especially when it came to crimes against volunteers, there were questions that sometimes seemed less than supportive. And so it caused us to just take a real look at how we talk to volunteers, how we frame questions, how we interact with people when bad things happen. And we consulted a lot of experts, and we have completely changed the way our protocols for dealing not only with crime, but other situations as well. We start with assuming that the volunteer was doing the right thing, and then we go from there. Now, it doesn't mean that sometimes there are underlying issues that need to be addressed, but we don't deal with that when we're dealing with the issue of an incident against a volunteer. We eventually get around to it at the appropriate time, perhaps, and more importantly, we deal with it up front in training so that people are prepared, understand what elevates risks, and then they make decisions accordingly. And we have seen positive results. We have seen crime rates drop. But I personally feel that the culture shift was one of the most important aspects of our sexual assault program. Why 2 years? Excellent question. And many people would like us to change it to 1 year. We would increase the number of applicants. But we've done a lot of research, and I think 54 years now of experience has shown us that 2 years is absolutely the minimum, really, in terms of integrating into a community, getting to know the language, developing the deep personal relationships that are so critical to Peace Corps service, and just being able to make a difference. If everyone left after 1 year, I fear we'd have a lot of dissatisfied people, because in fact Peace Corps service is really hard, and you can actually chart it. You know, you arrive and you're on a high, and then you get to your community and it's tough, and you miss your family and your girlfriend, and you got belly aches, the food's not really working for you. And then you start developing a tolerance to the food, and you build strong community relationships, and then by the time you leave, you can't believe that the 2 years has gone so quickly, and you're devastated to think that you won't be there anymore. And so 2 years is absolutely essential. 3 years even better, and we now have the lowest rates of early termination that we ever have in the history of our agency, and we also have more extensions, 3rd year and 4th year and 5th year extensions than we ever have in the history of Peace Corps. So the numbers are going in the right direction, but 2 years is really the minimal. Can I also I would like to tell one more story, and that is that you really cannot predict what your impact is going to be. It's very hard. We all go in there and we have our job to do, and we work really hard to make sure that we're able to do our job. But sometimes our impact is in places that we really just don't predict. And I want to just share one short story, and this is about a guy by the name of Vic, and he and his wife Adrienne served in Malawi. And I saw Vic after he had just completed his service, and I said, Vic, what was the thing that you're most proud of? What was your biggest result? He said, if you would have asked me that question 2 weeks ago, I would have told you something completely different, but let me tell you a story. And he said, I just left Malawi, and on the very last day, he said, I was a teacher. I was a math teacher, and my wife Adrienne was a health volunteer. And we had a modern American family life. I helped her with domestic chores, including washing clothes and washing the dishes and shopping in the market. We shared responsibilities. And on the weekends, we would go out and explore our village on our bikes and what have you. And we really loved being together. It was really a joyous way to begin our marriage. And I, went every day and I taught students. But just last week, as we were preparing to leave our community, one of the shyest people in my class came and knocked on my door. And I opened the door and I was so surprised to see him. And he said, "Mr. Vick, I want to tell you, when I grow up, I want to treat my wife like you treat yours. Because I've seen the way you treat her with such love and respect, how you have so much fun together as a couple. When I grow up, that's the kind of relationship I want to have with my wife." Now, he didn't say, "You were a fabulous math teacher. I'm definitely going to do better on my geometry tests in the future." What he said was, "You were a role model for a wonderful way to treat my wife." And those are the impacts that you could never predict. You couldn't actually even plan. But those are the things that I think are most important in terms of Peace Corps service. I just wanted to say that.
And that's great. Just like 1 year isn't enough for the Peace Corps, 1 hour isn't enough for our conversation. We should have scheduled 2. So we're going to have you back at some point
Anytime.
to talk further. I'm really grateful for everyone being here. We've got some cookies and lemonade outside, and if you're able to stay for a few minutes to answer any questions people might have afterwards, that would be great. We know how busy you are, so we're very grateful that you took the time to come over. And I just want to say how proud we are to have so many return volunteers here and in our program at SIS, and also how excited we are that we have so many applicants
Yeah, we're
here
so
as well.
thrilled.
So it's really wonderful. And just thanks again. Stephen Angel-Smith does all our work
yes.
here with both the return volunteers and getting people ready to apply, and we're just really grateful for all that he does. So
If
thanks.
I could just point out Danielle, too, is right next to Steve, who is our recruitment specialist for AU.
Wonderful.
So
Thank
if you have any questions, here's our Peace Corps team.
It's wonderful. So, Carrie, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Thank you.